After your MTT has translated the sentences in the grammar introduction document into the target language, and after you've linked TBTA to that document, you're ready to start entering your data. And there are several options here. If you happen to be working in a language that you know that you speak reasonably well, then we have a document. We have this document here, Lexicon Setup. It's tagged as optional because it's very rare that you're working in a language that you know fairly well. For example, I've never worked in a language that I know well when I'm building a lexicon and grammar for them, other than English. Okay, all of the other languages that I've worked in, that I've developed lexicons and grammars for, I've never spoken any of them at all. So it's very unlikely that you're building a lexicon and grammar for a language that you know fairly well. But if that is your situation, then we have this document. Document number 2, Lexicon Setup. It's called optional. Let's look at the one for English. In this document, you can define the features and forms for all of the words in the lexicon. So, okay, we're working with English for these videos, and English have 4 features: English nouns, gender, neuter, masculine, feminine. We use this feature whenever we have a third singular pronoun. We need to know, should we use it, he, or she? So we have this gender feature. And when we're putting in these values, we should always put the most commonly used value in first. In English, most nouns, we would use it, not he or she. So we always put the most commonly used one first. We also have another feature called common proper. Common nouns take articles and proper nouns don't. And again, we put the most commonly used feature value first. In English, most nouns are common, and only the proper names are proper. In English, we also have count nouns and mass nouns. Most are count nouns. Type of relative clause, standard, like the man that I met yesterday, or we could say the man who I met yesterday. That would be a standard. Locative is like the house where I live, the city where I was born. So where is a relativizer. So certain nouns, if they're modified by a relative clause, will have a where. We'll use where as the relativizer, and so we tag those as locative. Temporal is for the day when I was born. For certain nouns, if it's modified by a relative clause, then they'll use the relativizer when. So we have that feature. So we can define as many features as we want. If you need more, you can define as many as you want here. Now later, I'll show you how TBTA will scan through this document and import all of this data for you. Noun forms. In English, we just have a stem and a plural form. So we add the form, and then here we can write simple spell-out rules and simple morphophonemic rules. For example, the plural form generally consists of the stem plus the nest suffix. So there is a spell-out rule. Now here are some morphophonemic rules. If a stem ends in y, for example, family, and it's plural, instead of saying familys, we have a spelling rule that says change the y to an I and change the s to an es. So here's a morphophonemic rule. Church and bush, if they're plural, we don't say s, we add an es. For English verbs, we don't have any features. We don't need this, so we can leave this table blank. For the verb forms in English, we have the past tense form, which is generally the stem plus ed. And again, we have a spelling rule that changes yed to I plus ed, for example, studied, and some other morphophonemic rules. Third singular present form is usually the stem plus s, but there's some morphophonemic rules. We have the perfect, sometimes called the perfect participle form, like I have eaten, and then the participle, ing, sometimes called the gerund. So we have these rules. For the adjectives, every language that I've worked in has needed a type feature. One is descriptive, for example, good or bad. Cardinal numbers like 1, 2, 3. I saw 3 people at the mall yesterday. Ordinal numbers, first, second, third. values like that. Color, size, quantity. I read many books. Identity. I read only that book and not applicable. So every language I've worked in has needed values like this. And there are notes down here. You can read these on your own, and they explain that when TBTA imports these, what you'll expect to see. Adjective forms. For English, we need a comparative. John is taller. But then there are some more phonemic rules. For example, happy, if it ends with Y, then we again change the Y to an I. Superlative. John is the tallest, or Mary is the happiest. Adverbs. The location in the clause. Again, every language has needed these values. Preverbal, postverbal, clause initial. Okay, English, we have CP spec. That's from a particular linguistic theory. The question adverbs, like why did John go to the store? When did John go to the store? We would put those in CP spec position. Adverb forms, comparative. John ran quicker. John walked quicker than Mary. Actually, we would say John walked more quickly. John is faster. John is faster than Mary. John was earlier. Superlative. John walked the most quickly. John walked the fastest. Things like that. So I'll show you now how to import this data. But again, I want to stress, this is very unusual. You probably will not be using this document. Okay? I've never worked in a language where I could use this other than English. But let's go ahead and import this. For this, I'm going to start another language project because I don't want to disturb our normal English demo. So let's add a new target language. We need to choose our font. Yes, we have an alphabet. Yes. Okay, for this we're not going to do the initialization. Okay, here we're ready to import that document. So we navigate. Okay, so we want this one. And we'll select all of these tables. Okay, all of the selected tables were imported from the Word document named Lexicon Setup English. So now let's go see what that did for us. We can go to the lexicon. So there are no stems, but if we go to features, gender, common, proper, countable, mass, type of relative clause, if we say edit feature, here they are: neuter, masculine, feminine, common, proper, countable, and mass, type of relative clause. If we go to forms, we have the plural form. And if we look at form rules, we have these. So here's the simple spell out rule. It adds the suffix s to the stem, and we call that plural. And then the two more for phonemic rules. We have the example down here, armies, but the Y changes to an I, S changes to ES. Bushes, and again, okay, here the end of the stem doesn't change, so this is blank, but the S changes to ES. Okay, if we go to the verbs, we have these 4 forms, and here are the form rules. We won't look at each one. If we go to the features, okay, there were no features. There are no features for English verbs. Let's go to adjectives. Adjective type, if we say edit a feature, descriptive, cardinal number, ordinal number, etc., and that's the only one. If we go to forms, comparative and superlative, and we see the form rules. And again, I'm assuming you've watched that previous video series where we talked about how each of these correspond to a form and how to build these forms, how to build these rules manually. So I'm not going to describe that here. If we go to adverbs, again the same 2 forms. We have form rules for the adverbs. and the features, preverbal, postverbal, clause initial, clause final, CP spec. So if you know the language to some degree, and if you already know in advance the forms that you'll need for each part of speech and how to generate those forms, then you can use this document and it will save you quite a bit of time. But again, as I mentioned, it's very unlikely that you know the language well enough that you can do this in advance. I've never been able to use this document for any language except for English. So in the next video, we'll go back to entering our data the more traditional way.